You are standing in the middle of a room, and the world outside is rushing past your window with a deafening, relentless roar. Cars pass, people talk, and the machinery of modern existence ticks forward without a second thought. Yet, inside your own chest, time has completely ground to a halt. There is a cold, dense weight pressing against your ribs, an icy lump that forms in your throat every single time you attempt to draw a deep, untroubled breath. You try not to look at it. You try to outrun it through daily distractions, but you know its exact name. It is the quiet, chronic terror of loss. It whispers to you in the dead of night when the house is dark and taps on your shoulder in the harsh, uncompromising light of morning. You have engineered your entire existence around the desperate preservation of what you hold dear. You walk on fragile glass, terrified that every step might be the one that shatters the floor beneath your feet. A career built over decades of grueling effort. A bank account with numbers fluctuating on a screen. A romantic partnership that defines your social standing, or the physical health of a body that feels increasingly frail. You hold on to all of it with white-knuckled desperation. Security has become your religion, and you are its most anxious disciple. Every day feels like a high-stakes gamble where the house always wins and your chips are your own peace of mind. Stop right now, in this exact second, while your eyes scan these words. Freeze everything in your environment. Put down your phone. Close the background tabs in your mind and tune out the ambient noise of your surroundings. This is not a gentle, soothing piece of self-help prose designed to coddle your vulnerabilities or offer empty platitudes about how tomorrow will somehow be better. This text is an intellectual and psychological demolition. It is designed to tear down the rotting scaffolding of your conditioned anxieties, to set fire to the illusion of permanence, and to force you to confront the very architecture of your fears face to face. Imagine for a moment that you are listening to an audio track with no visuals whatsoever, no flashing graphics on a screen, no cinematic B-roll, no visual stimulation to rescue your attention span when it begins to drift. If the screen went pitch black right now, would these words command your absolute focus until the very last syllable? They must, because the fear of loss is not merely an emotion you experience. It is a self-constructed dungeon, and you are both the prisoner inside and the warden who threw the key into the ocean. Today we are going to dismantle those iron bars piece by piece permanently. Why does the human animal experience such excruciating agony at the prospect of losing something? The mechanism is deceptively simple. We suffer because we falsely believe we are the absolute owners of things that were only ever loaned to us by the universe. Look at your life through a lens of radical honesty. You gaze at your children and declare, "They are mine." You look at your partner and whisper, "They belong to me." You accumulate material goods, vehicles, real estate, investment portfolios, and unyielding titles, stamping every single acquisition with the possessive pronoun of your ego. This linguistic habit, this subtle, pervasive injection of the word mine into the fabric of daily consciousness, is the origin point of all psychological suffering. The great minds of antiquity understood this trap with terrifying clarity. Stoics, cynics, and Eastern sages alike observed that humanity's primary source of misery is the stubborn insistence on claiming dominion over a transient universe. Epictetus lived the brutal reality of physical enslavement, yet he remained fundamentally freer than the Roman emperors of his time because he understood a profound cosmic truth. Nothing external to the sovereign mind can ever truly be possessed. Marcus Aurelius, sitting atop the zenith of global power as the ruler of the Roman Empire, used to remind himself in the quiet of his military tent that every object of his affection, every title, and every breath was merely a borrowed shadow. Let us trace your existence back to its absolute origin. Did you arrive on this earth clutching a legal deed, to a piece of land? Did you emerge from the womb with a certified title to a bank account or a luxury vehicle? You arrived completely naked, possessing nothing, stripped of all social constructs and material attachments. Life granted you a biological vessel, a temporary allotment of time, and a spark of consciousness. Yet, almost immediately upon arrival, you began frantically collecting objects, relationships, and labels, wrapping your identity around them like a drowning man clutching lead weights. The core delusion of the fear of loss is this: you are terrified of losing things that you never actually owned in the first place. Consider an analogy to make this crystal clear. Imagine walking down a public street and finding a rare, exquisitely crafted watch lying on the pavement. You pick it up, strap it to your wrist, and admire its precision. But you know deep down that it does not belong to you. It is merely in your temporary custody. If you drop it and the glass shatters, or if the rightful owner taps you on the shoulder and asks for it back, will you experience a crushing existential breakdown? Of course not. You might feel a fleeting pang of disappointment, but you will hand it over without hesitation and continue your journey. Why? Because your core identity was never fused with the object. You never mistook the watch for your own soul. What would happen if you applied this exact perspective to every single element of your modern life? What if your career, your romantic attachments, your financial status, and your physical vitality were viewed not as permanent property, but as items checked out from a universal library for a fleeting afternoon? You are merely a traveler, passing through a hotel room. You do not own the furniture, the paintings on the wall, or the keys to the door. When your stay concludes, you pack your mental bags and walk out into the open air. The traveler, whose identity is untethered from the hotel room, can never experience the terror of eviction. Human psychology relies on a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, the quiet, stubborn assumption that time stands still for what we cherish. When you look at someone you love, or when you experience a stable period of financial security, your subconscious builds an invisible wall against the reality of decay. You live as though the present configuration of your life is a permanent monument carved into immutable stone. Nature, however, operates on a completely different set of laws. The fundamental rule of physical reality is absolute and uncompromised. Everything flows, everything mutates, everything decays, and everything eventually dissolves. Thousands of years ago, Heraclitus articulated this immutable law with absolute precision. You cannot step into the same river twice. The water rushing past your ankles is continuously replaced by new water. The physical structure of your body is shedding cells by the millions every second. The psychological landscape of your mind is shifting beneath your feet. Yet your ego wages a ferocious, exhausting war against this universal current. You are like a child standing on a beach, desperately trying to glue falling autumn leaves back onto the branches of a dying tree, weeping when the wind inevitably blows them away. The fear of loss is at its foundational core, a war declared against time, a war that cannot, by the laws of physics and existence, ever be won. You panic at the thought of losing a person because you unconsciously demand that a temporary intersection of two timelines must somehow stretch into infinity. You panic at the thought of losing a job because you expect a fluid, ever-changing economic structure to provide an eternal anchor for your self-worth. Look back across the timeline of your own history. Where is the exact day you called yesterday? Where is that crisis from 5 years ago that felt like the absolute end of the world? They have vanished into the vast, indifferent ocean of the past, swallowed whole by the relentless march of time. This is precisely why the Stoic tradition placed such heavy emphasis on mortality. Memento mori, the deliberate, unflinching meditation on death, was never designed to be a morbid or depressing exercise. It is the sharpest surgical instrument available to human consciousness, designed to cut away the superficial numbness of daily routine and force you to look at life in all its raw, unmitigated brilliance. When Marcus Aurelius had slaves whisper into his ear during triumphal parades, reminding him that he was mortal, it was an antidote to the intoxicating poison of permanence. Try this psychological experiment right now. The next time you embrace someone you deeply care about, allow a sudden wave of radical honesty to wash over you. Let the thought pass fully through your mind. This person will one day cease to exist in this physical realm, or I will. This precise configuration of light, sound, and emotion is happening for the very first and absolute last time in the history of the cosmos. Does this realization produce an initial sting of pain? Yes. But that pain is not destructive. It is a powerful solvent that dissolves the calcified indifference of routine. When you truly accept that a phenomenon is transient, you stop choking it with your demands for eternity. You stop trying to possess it, and instead, you simply experience it. Just as you do not ruin a magnificent musical performance by weeping inconsolably over the fact that the final notes will eventually fade into silence, you must learn to experience life without demanding that the song never end. To refuse to dance simply because the music will eventually stop is the ultimate tragedy of human existence. Let us push past intellectual abstractions and conduct a rigorous psychological stress test. It is time to drag your worst, most carefully guarded nightmare out from the shadows of your subconscious and place it directly under the analytical spotlight. What is the exact scenario that makes your stomach drop when you lie awake in the dark at 3 a.m.? Is it the total collapse of your financial stability? Is it public failure and humiliation? Is it the permanent departure of someone whose presence feels essential to your ability to function? Let us assume, for the sake of radical truth, that your absolute worst-case scenario has just materialized. The company folded, your accounts are completely depleted, the relationship is over, and your safety net has vanished into thin air. Now, look at the aftermath. Did the physical universe collapse into a void? Did the sun refuse to rise this morning? Did the fundamental laws of gravity suspend their operation? No. The physical world continues its indifferent mechanical rotation. People outside your window are still walking down the street. Traffic is flowing and birds are singing. More importantly, look inward. You are still breathing. Your heart continues to pump blood through your chest, and your mind is still processing reality. The catastrophe you feared for years has finally arrived, and paradoxically, you are still standing among the ruins. The most deceptive trick played by the fear of loss is its constant exaggeration of future pain. The human mind despises ambiguity, and when faced with an unknown future, it defaults to catastrophizing, projecting a level of suffering that is vastly disproportionate to physical reality. Your imagination constructs a fire-breathing dragon out of shadows and smoke. But the moment the disaster actually strikes and you are forced to engage with it directly, you discover that the dragon was merely an illusion cast by your own anxiety. You are biologically and psychologically engineered to endure far more than your comfort-addicted modern lifestyle leads you to believe. Look at the ancestral lineage that preceded you. Your forebears navigated ice ages, plagues, brutal wars, systemic collapses, and profound personal tragedies, passing down an unbroken chain of survival resilience encoded directly into your DNA. Yet, cushioned by the artificial safety of contemporary civilization, you have allowed your psychological immune system to atrophy to the point where a minor shift in circumstances feels like an existential annihilation. This brings us directly to Friedrich Nietzsche's ultimate philosophical demand. Amor Fati, the love of fate. True psychological freedom does not arrive when you merely tolerate the blows of circumstance with gritted teeth. It arrives when you reach a stage of development where you embrace every catastrophe, every abrupt loss, and every structural collapse as if you had explicitly requested it for your own evolution. Why? Because the forces that forge an authentic human being are not comfort, stability, and predictable ease, but rather the intense, refining fire of destruction and reconstruction. Consider the process of the sculptor. He takes a massive, rugged block of marble and begins striking it with heavy iron mallets. To an untrained observer watching from a distance, it looks like a brutal act of vandalism, a systematic destruction of the stone's integrity. But every heavy blow is calculated to chip away the crude exterior and release the masterpiece hidden within. The losses, failures, and sudden terminations in your life are those very hammer blows. When an enterprise fails, your panicked ego screams that your life is over. But in reality, that collapse may be the only force powerful enough to blast you out of a stagnant, soul-killing trajectory and force you toward your actual potential. The fear of loss is, at its root, a visceral terror of metamorphosis. It is the panic of the caterpillar, resisting the dissolution of its old form inside the dark, claustrophobic confines of the cocoon. Yet, can the butterfly ever take flight without the complete structural destruction of its crawling phase? The tearing of the cocoon is a fatal disaster for the caterpillar, but it is the birth of existence for the butterfly. Let us synthesize these realizations into a single cohesive paradigm that permanently alters how you navigate reality. What is the precise cognitive shift that completely eradicates the fear of loss from your nervous system? You cling to your financial accounts because you have been conditioned to believe that your very right to exist depends on numerical accumulation. You cling to interpersonal dynamics because you lack the internal fortitude to sit in silence with your own unexamined consciousness. You attempt to micromanage every minute variable of your personal and professional sphere because you believe that relentless vigilance is the price of survival. Here is the radical, unvarnished truth. You are not composed of the things you stand to lose. If an unprecedented catastrophe were to strip away every external marker of your identity tomorrow morning, leaving you standing in the street with nothing but the clothes on your back, your core essence would remain completely intact. Your capacity for reasoning, your indomitable willpower, your structural intelligence, your moral character, and your capacity to observe reality are entirely untouched by external plunder. Therefore, by your very metaphysical nature, you can never truly be reduced to zero. You cannot fall into a negative balance sheet of existence because your intrinsic worth is entirely independent of external validation, societal approval, or physical accumulation. Consider the vast amount of energy you waste every single day attempting to police the uncontrollable variables of the universe. You are sitting in a fragile wooden canoe in the middle of a tempestuous open ocean, frantically swinging your oars in an exhausting attempt to command the waves to stop swelling. The waves grow larger, the winds intensify, and you tremble with absolute terror, whispering, "What if the boat capsizes?" The radical answer you must learn to give yourself is simple. Let it capsize. What happens if the canoe actually flips? You plunge into the water. The initial shock is jarring, your lungs burn for air, and disorientation sets in. But within moments, the primal, evolutionary reflexes of your physical body take over. You remember how to swim. And as you tread water in the open sea, you look back at that capsized wooden canoe and realize something staggering. It was never a vessel of salvation. It was a cramped, rotting cage that kept you terrified of the very water that now sustains you. By losing the boat, you have gained the entire ocean. This is the exact threshold where the fear of loss dissolves into nothingness. Total, unreserved surrender to the worst-case outcome, combined with a complete detachment from the results of your actions. Are you preparing for a high-stakes professional pitch or a life-altering negotiation? Stop trembling with the anxious question, "What if they reject me?" Instead, consciously look into the abyss of failure and say to yourself, If they reject me, does human enterprise cease to exist? At worst, I will pivot, adapt, rebuild, and re-engage. This stance of radical surrender is not a manifestation of weakness or resignation. It is the most formidable display of power available to human consciousness. The exact moment you genuinely accept the possibility of losing a desired outcome is the precise moment that outcome loses its tyrannical leverage over your nervous system. And by a magnificent psychological paradox, the exact moment you are completely willing to lose something is the moment you are least likely to lose it. Why? Because your movements are no longer paralyzed by frantic desperation. You operate with an unshakable poise, absolute clarity, and fluid adaptability that naturally commands respect and success. This dynamic applies with equal force to interpersonal dynamics. If you suffocate a partner with clingy insecurity born from the chronic terror of abandonment, you actively generate the very outcome you dread most. Fear invariably manifests the monster it obsesses over. But when you approach relationships from a position of absolute sovereignty, when you can look someone in the eyes and communicate with utter sincerity, I value our connection deeply. I choose to walk beside you every single day, but you are a sovereign individual, and the door is always open if your path diverges from mine. The entire dynamic transforms. The clinging tension vanishes entirely, because human beings are naturally drawn to those who are completely capable of standing alone. Close your eyes now and let this visualization settle deep into the marrow of your bones. Envision every single mental anchor you have dragged behind you for decades, every anxious contingency plan, every toxic scenario constructed by your ego to protect you from imaginary threats, every white-knuckled grip on people, statuses, and possessions. Visualize yourself opening your fingers one by one and releasing them all into the wind. Let them go. Is the career structure collapsing? Let it fall. Is a relationship dissolving? Let it depart. Is your comfort zone shattering into dust? Let it burn to the ground. Now, turn your attention to the unshakable consciousness rising from those ashes. You are no longer held hostage by the approval of strangers, the fluctuations of the market, or the permanence of transient forms. You possess the ultimate luxury, the willingness to step into the unknown without demanding advance guarantees from the universe. This radical uncertainty no longer paralyzes you, it exhilarates you. You know with absolute certainty that you cannot be permanently destroyed because you are not the container. You are the life force inhabiting it. The fear of loss has reached its absolute end. There is no longer an illusory, fragile ego left to protect. There is only pure, unadulterated consciousness, observing, experiencing, feeling, and existing with absolute freedom in the eternal now. Take one deep, expansive breath. Let the residual tension drop away from your shoulders, down your spine, and out into the ground beneath you. Lean back against the solid foundation of your own indestructible awareness and watch what happens next. The exact moment you stop running from the shadows, reality steps forward to meet you with unreserved generosity and raw, breathtaking clarity. Because true freedom does not begin when everything is secured. It begins precisely where fear ends.